seas. One is the fact that the regulation of fishing vessel or merchant shipping vessel or other vessel activities on the high seas is almost, not entirely, but almost the exclusive authority of the flag state. In other words, the country whose flag that vessel is flying. And if the country is flying, there has been a proliferation of so-called flags of convenience over the last 30 to 40 years. Basically, countries that sell their flags to companies owning fishing vessels, merchant shipping vessels, other vessels, and in return, the companies know that they will be subject to few or very lax regulations, and they won't have to abide by flag state control to ensure that they're in compliance with international law. There are other methods available to pressure these vessels and these companies to comply with international law, but the primary authority, the flag state, in many cases is becoming a fiction of international law in that it doesn't really exist in any practical sense in terms of regulating the activities of vessels operating beyond areas of national jurisdiction. And another area, and one that the coalition I work with is quite strongly in supportive of, is the need to establish enhanced protections for biodiversity, conservation and protection regulations for biodiversity on the high seas. And this runs the gamut from fishing activities to the potential use of the oceans to mitigate climate change, the seabed mining, new and emerging issues which Salvatore will probably talk about, bioprospecting. And the Law of the Sea Convention does provide for general obligations for conservation, but it does not provide enough specificity to establish a rigorous regulatory framework to cover both existing as well as new and emerging uses of the high seas in an integrated and comprehensive fashion. And the European Union has proposed at the UN General Assembly that a diplomatic conference be established to begin negotiating a new implementing agreement to the Law of the Sea Convention for high seas biodiversity conservation. And we're very strongly supportive of that, we being the coalition that I work with, and we're hopeful to see this move forward. We hope to see the European Union put in more diplomatic effort to bring other countries on board. There is some resistance, as you might imagine, from countries like the United States. But there is a lot of interest in exploring the options for how this would take shape and what specifically this type of agreement would produce. And finally, I think it's important as well to meet the Johannesburg commitment to establish representative networks of marine protected areas on the high seas. There is a recognition that there needs to be an enhanced legal framework in order to be actually to be able to do this. And from an environmental and conservation point of view, number one, this is a political commitment that countries have made. But number two, more importantly, it's important to set aside certain areas of the high seas as well as within countries' national waters as refugia, as reserves, as areas off limits to extractive activities to ensure that at least some portion of the oceans survives the continuous movement toward greater extraction, overfishing, use of the oceans for various benefits, and to serve as reference sites so we can have an understanding of how the oceans are responding to the activities that are occurring in areas that are open for extractive activities. And I just want to mention that one of the members of the coalition, Greenpeace International, has called for 40% of the world's oceans to be set aside as marine reserves. That's not an outrageous demand or call or recommendation, and in fact it fits in quite well with some of the best scientific information available on the need to protect enough areas of the ocean so that we can be ensured that we're able to protect marine biodiversity and enhance the sustainable utilization of fisheries and other resources. So let me conclude with that, Paul, and thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So we've got some really some concerns about, do we have appropriate use of the existing legal arrangements? Do we need new ones? How are we dealing with new uses and emerging uses that weren't foreseen when the Law of the Sea was developed? And are there abuses to the international management regime, so to speak, through flags of convenience and other means that imply compliance but maybe don't quite deliver on managing the resources and governing the seas? So let's keep those in mind as we move forward and get some introductory comments from Ellie now, and please give us your perspective on all this.